Hi everyone, welcome back to episode 2 of the biography and expense ledger of Olive. The end of episode 1, what we had discovered is after 3 perfectly normal months of owning a free farmyard mutt, the cost was $1,349.10. I was reimbursed $247 for an out-of-pocket cost of $1,102. Now, all this was before things got weird. So that was from March of 2024 to June of 2024. So now let's go from July of 2024 to October of 2024. So let's start in July. So July, Olive, who had been born in February. So July, she is 7 months old. And so we are going along with training and socialization classes. However, she's showing signs of being reactive, protective, frightened, all of that together. But we're working our way through with those classes. And in hindsight, I'm just wondering if some of all of that was really a form of pain that I just wasn't noticing. In the month of July, $746.45, of which of that I was not reimbursed anything during that time because none of those were still in her wellness policy and she hadn't had anything from her illness or accident policy. So now we go to August. She is still having a good time in her puppy social classes. Socialization classes. However, one time we're there and all of a sudden I hear a yelp and nobody was really looking at her when she made the yelp. So no one's really sure exactly what, if anything, caused the yelp in August. But she kept limping and kept limping. And so I took her to the vet to have them look at the limping and they couldn't find anything wrong with her. They did all of the range of motion things, lots of manipulation. And they said they couldn't find anything wrong with her and thought maybe her little yelping, she just overdid it, but she was about to be spayed at the end of August. And so they thought that during that time, just that bed rest should get her to where she's pretty good. So I get ready for Olive spaying. So she goes in to be spayed at the end of August. And my total expenses for her, which did include primarily the spaying, it included medications, the cone, a few other things. In the month of August 2024, the cost for Olive was $1,021.75. And of that amount, $225 were reimbursed from her wellness policy for her pet insurance. We're moving along. September starts. This little girl, I've had her on 2 weeks of very strict bed rest. Didn't let her do a whole lot of anything. So in September, I think she's actually doing a little better. I'm not seeing the limping. I'm not seeing the bunny hopping, some of those other things. So we go back to her training classes and she just seemed to end up doing a little limp here and there. I take her back to the vet in September. And again, they can't find anything wrong with her. They check her out again, but they did notice that when they put their fingers along her back, she twitched. And so they thought, it might be a combination of maybe growing pains and maybe she did something to a disc or something like that. And so I got medication for that. I got a heating pad and then the directions to limit her movement. But for September, it is now $768.68. So up to this point, everything that had been reimbursed for Olive's pet insurance has come through her wellness plan. But now we start hitting a few other things. So if you didn't watch the first episode, I talked about how I signed her up for pet insurance on the way up on a phone. And I just marked everything because I didn't have time to worry about it and I didn't have my reading glasses on. Well, it included basically everything. Not only did it include illness and accident, exams, medication, rehabilitation, alternative therapies, a few other things like that. But I also marked unlimited claims. So there wasn't an annual limit of how many claims I could put in for her. And then I put in $500 yearly deductible. So in September, I start hitting some things that I'm paying that $500 yearly deductible, and 90% reimbursement. And so I could have chosen 80%, 70%, 50%. I chose 90%, which has been actually very, very wonderful. Now, October gets crazy. So for October, beginning of the month, she is limping again. I am sad. Everybody's sad. I take her into my regular vet and they do x-rays. Olive is not a cooperative patient for anything. So she was not really cooperative with the x-rays, but they got 2 images. They were really honest to saying they were a bit blurry, but they still can't see anything. And her range of motion is fine. She's not yelping, no tension when they're doing all types of things for all of her joints. So they're really not sure. I also get a Lyme test at that time because it could have been Lyme disease is what we're looking at that point. Then the recommendation was going back to her twitching on her back of, well, maybe some holistic treatments. So how about some laser therapy, acupuncture, and chiropractic treatment? So I go up to a holistic vet. And that's what we start. We start laser and chiropractic. She's not going to sit around for needles for acupuncture, so that was out. However, what they did is they used the same x-rays that my primary vet sent over, which in hindsight was a big, big mistake. But I start taking videos of Olive, really showing what she's doing because I don't think I'm explaining it right. It's just not right. So anyway, we are going through October, and finally they say you need to take her to an orthopedist. So that's what I do. So as I'm hunting around for someone who does orthopedic work, I call one place first, and they're very honest with me of her age. If something was wrong with her, they can certainly diagnose her, they can take care of the imaging, etc. But they would not do anything for a puppy that young. So she would have to go to a specialist. I was like, I just need in. I am just beside myself. I just need to know what's wrong with my little girl. And so she goes in for a day of sedation. She gets this cute little picture in the lobby. See that cute little picture? Because it's around Halloween. So she goes in for sedation, full x-rays, full exam, and sure enough, she comes back with hip dysplasia. So I'm going to show you that x-ray right there. I'm not a veterinarian, but that doesn't look right, right? So refer me to one of 2 places. The first place they refer me to is called VOSM. It's Veterinary Orthopedic Sports Medicine. And I had heard of this place before, and I was a little afraid to call because I figured it was cost $1 million. I still was not sure what, if anything, the insurance really covered for something. You know, she was born with hip dysplasia. Would the pet insurance cover it? And the thing with VOSM, they are well known because that's where if you have an elite sports dog that gets injured, the ones that go flying through the air and they get injured, they do surgery on U.S. Army canines, state police canines. So I'd heard about them through all of this. And so I was like, oh. So then I called the other place first. I got in right away to see that orthopedist. And when I got there, I got a little angry, but I got over it because they wouldn't take the x-rays from the one before. They said because there wasn't a clear left and right noted on the x-ray. I did point out that the actual, the notes kind of pointed out, but at this point I was desperate. I paid for an entire round of x-rays again. Once again, sedation, everything. So they do all the x-rays. It comes back, that's $856 for that day. It comes back, she has hip dysplasia. I meet with the surgeon. This is over a couple of days. And she basically gives me 3 options. Option 1 was to break her pelvis because her growth plates were still, fusing together. And there was something, you break their pelvis, you can kind of reposition their joints a little bit. I don't know a whole lot more than that. But she wasn't too excited about that option because she did think Olive was just probably a couple weeks too old for that with looking at her growth plates. The second choice option that they were really giving me and pushing was to remove the ball of her femur. And I thought that seemed extreme. I had never heard anything about this, but they just take out the ball of the femur, and with the dog being so young, eventually they just learn how to walk without the ball of their femur in their hip joint. So then the third option was total hip replacement surgery. And then they said, but we don't do that on puppies. So I'm like, okay. And they said, there's really only one place to go, and you guess what that place is, right? It's VOSM. So as I'm in the car crying, I need to back up a minute because I did submit the stuff to VOSM. I know I said I, called the other place. When you call VOSM, there's a recording that basically says, we're not going to talk to you. It's a nice recording. It says, we're not going to talk to you. You need to gather all your paperwork, submit previous, vet notes, all this stuff to us. We will review it and we'll let you know if it's a good candidate for our services. And so I had sent all this stuff in, and as I Googled, we're talking about weeks and weeks and weeks before other people said they heard back. So it had just been a couple of days. And so in my car, I'm crying because I don't know what to do with my poor puppy. And then basically that surgeon's like, we could set this up for next week and take out the ball of her femur. And that just seemed really extreme. So I'm in my car crying at this point, and my phone rings. And I pick it up, and it is VOSM. They have reviewed the paperwork, and they have decided that Olive would be a good candidate for some of the services that they offer. And lo and behold, they had a cancellation for the next day. If I could make it, that'd be great. Otherwise, they could see me in about 3 weeks. And so I let them know we will be there in the morning. So by this point in October, we are now at October 29th was her appointment at VOSM. By this point in October, I had spent $5,029. And that is primarily on the x-rays, the consultation, the sedation, all that. There's a few other things mixed in there. There is some food, some other things like that, some training classes, etc. But that's how much I had spent this far. So I get to VOSM. They take Olive away. They take her away, and she's gone for like 2 hours. I'm like, oh my God, what happened to my dog? And know that I haven't even asked them how much this consultation was going to cost. In my head, it was costing $1 gazillion. So I'm finally called back, and I meet with the surgeon, and he comes out, and apparently he's been with Olive for 2 hours. They have walked up and down stairs. They have walked sideways, all this other stuff. The vet before that, the surgeon who was ready to remove her femur, had spent like 20 minutes with Olive. And so this surgeon had spent 2 hours with Olive. And so there's a couple things that he says. Number one, he says, we're not breaking her pelvis. Number two, he says, we're not removing the ball of her femur. Number three, she will probably need hip replacement surgery one day. But at this point, what he thought was her biggest problem was that I had basically kept this poor dog from moving for now a couple of months. And her back legs had atrophied so bad that it was actually intensifying the effect of the hip dysplasia. So, says all that. Then he does say something that will resonate with me. He said, since you've already paid for so much in x-rays, we're not going to x-ray her again. Although they have equipment that can see, some other stuff. I think they have a little bit higher quality equipment. And he did say that I'd really like 2 other images. And he said ankles, and then he said shoulders. The ankles are going to come back to be important in episode 3. But he then tells me that this is our treatment plan. She is going to continue receiving the laser, because also part of that $5,000 is laser, chiropractic adjustments, massages, all of that stuff. So continue with the laser, chiropractic, supplements, things like that. And what he wanted her to do most of all was to play. I was to let her run and play and yes, jump and do everything, because the hip dysplasia wasn't going to get worse because you're born with it. But if the good thing was maybe we could really tighten up the muscles around it, and then she won't be in as much pain. He did say, based upon everything he had seen, she definitely was a candidate for hip replacement surgery, but their goal is to make sure that the dog outlives the surgery, because apparently it's good for about 10 years. And then, so they don't want to do this on puppies unless there's no other option. So I said, okay. And then I said one other thing, which was interesting. I said, well, because he told me that I would come back in 6 months, which was going to be in April. And I said, well, if I come back in April and she has to have something done, I need it done before the end of April because I have this pet insurance and I'm sure they're going to cancel her. They're going to see that here's this dog who needs this surgery that's going to, over $10,000 surgery, and they're going to cancel her. And then he tells me something that I don't know if this is unique in Maryland or if it's everywhere. But in Maryland, pet insurance is regulated like health insurance. They cannot cancel a dog's policy because of claims or even raise her rates just because she's her. She's in a cohort and her rates will raise with that cohort. So he told me make sure that my credit card, on file, never becomes expired, etc. But to keep that up, and then they have to keep issuing me pet insurance, which I thought was great. So, and then I go out to pay, expecting to pay, how much are you going to pay for, at this point, almost 3 hours worth of time with one of the country's best canine orthopedic surgeons. And so I go and they tell me the amount. Are you ready for the amount? $272.44. Of that, my insurance paid $245 because now I've hit that $500. But I could not get over that was the amount for this. So give me a second. I'll tell you how much I got back reimbursed for October. All right, not counting what I was reimbursed for that consultation, $3,366 is what the pet insurance has now reimbursed for just October. So that brings us to the end of the story about Olive. And so let me now go over some figures with you. So give me a second. So her expenses from July of 2024 to October of 2024. So pet insurance was $387. That's because this was a 4-month period. And so there were 2 premiums in there. Training, $441. Food, $112. Supplies, $309, like collars and things like that. Toys and treats, $159. I do need to say at this point, she had plenty of other toys, food, and treats that I bought, like the regular grocery store, etc. So this does not capture everything, but it does capture things that were exclusive at something that it was definitely a pet place. And so we have all of those things. And then what we have here is for her entire vet bills from July through October of 2024 were $6,550.17. Of that amount, though, I was reimbursed from her pet insurance $4,097.77. Altogether, for all of her expenses, my out-of-pocket was $4,207.77. So altogether, I spent about $2,000 out of pocket on just vet bills. But like I said, luckily her pet insurance covered over $4,000 of that. So we leave. I'm very excited. Olive's now going to run and play and she's going to feel a ton better. And then I would not go back to see the vet and for another 6 months. But if that was the end of this, we would not have just 2 episodes, or we would only have 2 episodes. So if you want to know what happens next, because it's not her hip dysplasia that ends up with her first surgery. So it is something else. And so I will go over that in episode 3. So thanks for joining me for the biography and the expense ledger of Olive.